Grab your coffee and join me, NICOA, for a caffeinated conversation about life. I'll be talking to people who have chosen to walk their own paths and, just like me, are creating a life by design. I hope it will give you the inspiration you need to do exactly the same. Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee with Nicoa. This is Nicoa, and I have the pleasure of having a award-winning author. I did check that out, RG. So RG SHORE is with us today, and RG actually found me, I think, right? Isn't that how we got connected?
Yeah, I watched your podcast or listened to you on with Dr. Rick. So
yes, Dr. Rick Diamond, the story healer. What a phenomenal conversation that was. And thank you for watching and listening to that interview. Even if I get a listener, even if it's through these amazing guests, I love getting new listeners. So I appreciate you reaching out and asking to participate, because when you sent me information and I started stalking you, as I do, I got super excited. So let me do the quick intro and then we'll jump right in. I know you're going to have a lot of insights for our listeners today. Everybody, please welcome RG SHORE, spiritual counselor, energy healer, Reiki practitioner, not just an award-winning author. I mean, you have created a nonprofit called northwestwisdom.org. Everybody should go check that out right now. And you have found an ability to really help heal the world with your expertise, your education, your skills. You specialize in embodied spiritual counseling, healing energy. You leverage the techniques of visualization, meditation. You're a Reiki practitioner, and you really mastered and have started really helping your clients with the power of grounding. And it's interesting, I'll share right now, my feet are on a grounding mat. I don't know if those work. You'll have to tell us. Do those work?
I'd be lying if I told you I knew.
You're like, could we please go get outside on the real ground? Thank you. What I love about your background, too, is that you were able to take historic trauma and experiences as a person of color, coming from a marginalized community, to turn your gifts now into service for people in similar circumstances to your own. And it's kind of an interesting story you have. We won't go into great detail, but you have a background that is rooted in some trauma, including being incarcerated, which is intense. And talk about a shock to a life by design. You're going down one path, and then all of a sudden, you have to rewrite your story. And I think that is probably the essence of what we will talk about today, because a life by design is my entire focus, and it's never too late. I hope our listeners remember that no matter what your circumstances, you can start fresh every day with a clean sheet of paper. So, I do want to highlight, though, that award you got for the book. We're putting you in the same category. I mean, everybody pause and listen. Thich Nhat Hanh and Brené Brown received this same Gold Nautilus Award. Tell us more about that recognition before we go into your story.
I mean, you just keep fluffing my pillow. It's funny because, like, I always start off by saying, and I'm a formerly incarcerated person, because, like, the reality is we're all these labels and we're none of these labels. So,
right.
Again, it's easy to be like, here's my resume, but the resume is the life experience. It's not like the labels that you wear with them. And so, again, I'm very grateful and honored to be, selected for the Nautilus Book Award. And it's such an honor. And also it's just another label. It's just another thing. Right. And so you try not to get too attached to those things. Obviously they help in promoting the book and getting my work out there. But, a part of this whole thing that we're in, these life by designs is understanding that, like, the story is much larger than any one thing. And so reframing the story means zooming really, really far out and even beyond your own lifetime, I think. And that's really, really important in beginning to understand what does it mean to, like, accept these wounds and heal these wounds and address these wounds and love these parts and understand that they're all part of the same part. Well, you zoom out large enough, you realize threads are just part of a much larger tapestry. And so,
and you have a beautiful tapestry. I mean, I didn't even mention that you have this beautiful wife. You were recently married, a few years back, and you guys have created this beautiful life that is very purpose driven. I love looking at people's lives. To your point, the tapestry is unique for every single person. And a lot of times people get hung up in feeling just so different, thinking that's a bad thing, thinking that they're so unique to their circumstances. But it is in that uniqueness, I think, that makes us all the same, that we're all weird and we're all unique and we all have different traumas. Mm-hmm. And we're supposed to uncover them in the journey, the hero's journey of our life, right? And figure out how to heal them so that, when we're finished, at least in this version, maybe we feel a little bit more knowing. We remember our wholeness, our oneness. Talk to us a little bit about who you were before you found meditation and wrote this beautiful book. Tell us about the context of your life by design prior to all of this.
Yeah, brown person in a white space. I've always been a creative person. I've always been really into music and art, and actually I've always been into spirituality, whether I was prepared for it or not. And so I've always been me. And I think the larger thing is accepting the meanness, right? Like accepting the whole thing has been a life journey and still continues to be that life journey. But if you're wanting sort of like the Wikipedia points, or like, it's like, okay, I was born in India. I was adopted. I was put in an orphanage as a baby, don't have any idea of birth parents, which is, sort of the archetype there is the abandonment wound, right? If you don't know where you come from, how do you know where you're going type of wound. And adopted to a white family, very, very loving people in the Pacific Northwest, full of their own shit, right? Like, I mean, and I mean that with grace and love, that everybody has their wounds, right? And, I think a wound that people aren't talking enough about is, what does it mean to be a person of color adopted to white family in this country, because it's just like, it's not people think that they're saving babies maybe, but if you don't have the wherewithal and ability to understand what kind of trauma that can bring, and you're not going to have those conversations, then it means a lot of isolation and loneliness and all the stuff growing up. And so
I'm sure. Yeah.
There's a lot of that involved in my past, of like even not necessarily being aware of those things, but always being aware. It's a both and. It's like my body's aware, even though my brain goes into a different sort of survival mode. And one of the things I talk about in my book is that, there's sort of 3 different survival energies that are more common, which is fight, flight, or freeze. But the 4th that people don't talk enough about is actually called fawning, which is the ability to essentially adapt to any situation. So you have created this ability, almost like your superpower, to because you're different, because you don't fit in, because that there's something different about you. You find these ways of adapting, and I became the best at it. My therapist in my 30s said that I was maybe the best she's ever seen.
Really? Give us an example of where you fawned. Like, is it just simply adapting into the personality of somebody you're with, or?
Yeah. Essentially it's you walk into a room and you can read it so perfectly. You know exactly who you need to be in order to kind of disguise yourself. So there's a lot of pros to that, right? But the con is you grow up never really knowing who you are. There's a disassociation with your own identity. But I was born in India. I'm 5'2" on a really good day. I'm 5'4" with roller skates. Right? I'm a tiny little human being in this white world. And I was in middle school when 9/11 happened. There, and my book talks a lot about that towards the latter half of the book. But there's a reality that like I went from worrying about pimples and girls liking me to like, what does it mean to be accused for attack in New York as a 13-year-old, right? Like, so there's that level of survival energy. And so, you know, a lot of people of color, especially in the Pacific Northwest that I've talked to, sort of had that same sentiment of like survival mode. And so, I mean, when you're talking about fawning, I mean, I got good at everything else other than just being who I was, right? So good at art, good at music, good at singing, good at making friends, good at making people laugh, good at sports, good at the whole thing other than just being whoever it is that makes me me.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you there's a phrase that is an inside joke in our family, and it is this: everybody's taller on rollerblades.
Yeah.
So I had to share.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah.
So just remember, you're always taller. So you're just the right size at the same time. So can you share a little bit about some of this racism? I know that when you were incarcerated, you talk about how you were in the midst of a sea of white men who were racist and horrifying. I mean, have you had, I mean, every person of color and every woman and, you know, someone who is different has probably had some sort of racist or experience where they were, suppressed in some way. What are some of those experiences that really have helped you become a better server to others now, where you can see value in the experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal as a, person who's seeking spiritual embodiment and helping other people heal through that is being able to see that there's always value, no matter where you are. And that's tough, right? People say hindsight's 20/20. Try doing it as it's happening in real time. And so, my book, The Ocean Inside Me, is all about my experiences learning to go into my body while incarcerated, surrounded by neo-Nazi sympathizers and white supremacists. And as obviously a person of color, knowing that like I'm in survival mode, but what if I tried to be in thriving mode in the least likely place? Like, what does that mean? And so that's what my book is primarily about, is how do I, while experiencing like explicit, like condensed version, heightened version of racism, how can I go into the body and create this place where I'm really addressing things that go way beyond just sort of service level addressing. And with that said, to answer your question, these are not things that just happen in prison, right? And right. What I come to is I come to realize, and I write this in my book, prison is not a reflection of prison. Prison is a reflection of America. So the micro is always a reflection of the macro, and what's happening out on a larger scale is happening within the cellular level of everybody's body. And when things were like exploding in the media or exploding because of, for example, the murder of George Floyd, right? Like when that happened, I was incarcerated, and clearly I'm inside in an area where you can't leave and you don't have access to everything else going around you. And yet that was felt in the prison, that energy, that heightened sense of injustice was felt. And so that's one example of like, again, whatever's happening out there is happening in here, and you can't heal out there until you heal in here. It's all connected.
RG, how did that feel for you? What did that feel like, being in there in the midst of all that? Guess what, y'all? I published a book. Your Life by Design, a Coffee with Nicoa self-care coaching journal, is now available on Amazon. This interactive journal begins and ends with powerful queries, guiding you on a quest for the kind of life by design you don't need a vacation from. I've included an in-depth look at strategic self-care to empower you and hold you accountable to really getting to know your true self. It's time to prioritize you. Use the link in the show notes to buy yours today.
Like another day. I mean, it's
right.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think to a lot of people, especially white people, it was like a big deal. But like to a person of color, it's just another day. And again, it's bringing it's bringing the spotlight to the reality that like walk in my shoes for a minute, right? Just for a minute, walk in my shoes. And part of the healing process was like, oh, even as a person of color in this white prison, no one's going to walk in my shoes until I walk in their shoes. And so there was a level of, I have to acknowledge the white supremacist within me in order for the white supremacist to acknowledge the brown person within themselves. And that there's a level of healing there that like takes all ego out of equation, and takes all level of this or that or tribalism or this camp or that camp out. Right. And so I ended up studying the law while I was incarcerated and ended up becoming essentially the jailhouse lawyer for the very men who were oppressing me. And so there was a level of as I'm doing the meditation, as I'm saying, okay, universe, I'm ready. Let's do this thing. The meditation, if it's really working and if it's really authentic, it'll always lead to that type of healing where there's a social justice component and then a compassion towards the very people who are oppressing you. And if that isn't happening, then, there's some other things that need to be addressed within yourself first.
So, RG, tell me though, I mean, were you fortunate to be raised by a family that was already having these types of conversations? I mean, at what point, what was your conversion point to say, holy crap, I got to do something here to survive and thrive? What was the turning point to meditation even? I mean, how did you learn all this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, so I studied religious studies in college. I was drawn towards it from age 18. I grew up in a Christian home, sort of a Catholic Christian Pacific Northwest home. Thankfully, my parents were not very you have to believe in these things, but it was still a Christian home. And yet my body, and my book talks a lot about this, is my body physiologically knew I was from the East. So I was raised in the West with Western cultural ideas and beliefs and systems that my Eastern body always didn't really necessarily sit with. Though I didn't have the wherewithal of my brain to recognize that my body knew something was up. And so...
what do you mean by that? So your body knew something was up, meaning that it didn't feel quite... describe that. Somatics are a big piece of the work I do as a coach as well. And so for our listeners to begin to connect that head and heart, right? The head and the body, that integration is tricky. How did you start to see and feel the disconnect? How would you describe that?
Yeah. We live in here. We live in the thought. That's our brain is wired to just believe brain, right? And there's a saying that I like to tell my clients, which is don't believe everything you think. And there's a reality to you're not just your thoughts. And until you learn to sit and sit and sit back behind the thought, you're just looking at the movie screen thinking that the movie is the only thing exists. But you're just sitting in a theater. That's the reality. Is you're sitting in a theater and you're watching all these thoughts go by, and you've been convinced that these thoughts are just the only thing that exists. And so the body, the embodiment that I'm talking about is once you decide to pause, once you decide to participate in that stillness and say, okay, I'm going to take a step back and observe and become an observer or a witness to everything that's happening. You then are saying, I'm willing to actually empower myself and give myself a little bit of agency in this story that we're talking about, because I'm not a victim to the story. I'm a co-creator of the story. And so I think a big part of that shift that needs to happen is, what if you were not just the thoughts you were thinking? And once that happens, you actually move into your body. You move into the space where I'm feeling my fingertips for the first time. I'm feeling what it means to be in this body. Or as Ram Dass likes to call it, a meat suit, right? We are just
Yes,
sort of
I love
in
Ram Dass.
meat suits. And, or as the Dalai Lama says that I love, is he says, you know, the it's just a change of clothes from the last life, right? So we're just in a change of clothes, and so what does it mean to be in that suit for now? And that's what I mean by sitting in the body. And once you sit in the body, your body, and this is another thing I tell people, is that there's nothing you haven't been through that your body hasn't also been through. And so your body is actually your biggest advocate for what is really going on. So
it started talking to you in what ways? So was it an uncomfortableness? Was it an anxiety? Because you're speaking my language, RG. I love this because I teach people about this observer of self and creating space between you and whatever the stimulus is. And it's in this space between you and the stimulus that is like a no man's land. And it's in that space that I get to choose. Right? That is where the agency comes in. I have the power to create a reality. I can make it mean whatever I want to make it mean, or choose to experience it or not. So, and I often am reflecting in some of my social media work around, I'm feeling an anxiety. I remember once hugging my husband, the father of my 3 children, and I had all this anxiety coming up my back and up into my neck. And as I was hugging him, I said to him, you know what? One day that will be gone. One day that will be gone, because I knew that we could release that. I knew whatever it was I was experiencing, I could heal that. And I don't know how I knew that, but I was like, I'm going to get rid of this feeling, this tense, anxiety on my neck. Mm-hmm. At what point do you have any moments of memory that you could reflect on like that, where you're like, yeah, this religion thing, I'm not quite sure it's me, or I don't know, you tell me.
Yeah. I think the answer is like threefold. One, I want to address the reality that like what comes up for me is not going to come up for listeners. Right. And so,
exactly.
And so it's really important that like, if I'm a listener, if I gauge that, oh, what RG is saying is this, and then I'm not feeling it, am I doing it wrong? So I really want to address that, like, it's going to show up in your body differently than it's going to show up for anybody else in their own body. So part of this process is an intuitive process of listening to yourself more than listening to me. And I always tell my clients, if whatever I say don't feel right, then kick me out, kick it out. Like you don't need me. You just listen to your body first, and your body will always lead you. Your body is your greatest teacher. So I want to say that first. The second thing, where it comes up for me was, so I'm a huge believer in chakras and energy and in those wheels within our body. And so the lower 3 chakras, and I don't mean lower in like value, but just lower in the body. The first chakra is like the Muladhara chakra, which is the root chakra, which is where people feel safe, people feel secure and validated and heard. Well, clearly in not feeling any of those things as an abandoned baby, growing up in a white world as an adopted brown kid, like navigating all that stuff out, that root chakra never felt safe. And so where I felt it in my body was in my root, which is in my lower back. And I still feel a lot of like there's some physical stuff that still needs to kind of be worked out. And so that's a validating, empowering, and also a big patience game, because when it gets to the point where you feel it in the body, that means it's become like generational, or it's become much larger than just a small issue. And so you have to be patient with yourself. And so once you realize that, oh, my body holds trauma, it starts to click, and you're like, well, where else could it be except within my body? Like, if I'm feeling pain, obviously it's going to be held in the body. Like, where else could it go? And so then a part of the meditation process that's so powerful is once you sit in that stillness, once you sit in that surrender, your body actually starts to say, here's where it is. And then once you pinpoint, oh, it's like in my lower back for me, but for other people it might be in the shoulders or the neck for you. I mean, wherever it is, you can then go there. You can not only,
Mm.
you can send breath there, you can send energy there, and then you can send your very self there to sit with that. Because what's going on is that, and again, I discovered this in the worst place possible, is there are different versions of you that exist that when, 11-year-old RG or 13-year-old RG experienced this particular trauma, he got stuck at that time in that place. And then that holds this very specific place within his body that is then in my 36-year-old body. And so for me to release that and address that, I have to become friends and make conversation with that part of me that exists in that time at that age, because 11-year-old RG is stuck in 1990, 98, right? And
Right.
he's never moved past 1998. And so part of my book, especially in the first chapter, is as I moved further and further into meditation, I got to a place where my third eye opened up and my chakras were aligned. And all of a sudden, I'm shot to this place back in 1999 where I'm addressing and seeing my younger self for the first time, not in a memory. This is not a memory. This is happening. And he has no idea who I am. So I'm seeing
Mm.
him and he's seeing me and he has no idea. And in that moment, it clicked. Oh, there's a disconnect between the present self and the past self. And that disconnect is trauma.
Ah, that was beautifully said. And what's profound about it is a couple of things that you said. First of all, yes, everybody's having a different experience. Secondly, you are role modeling your experience to help people at least become the observer and question themselves. I mean, I think, always share your story for sure, because someone will resonate in some way with that. When you said patience, pretty critical. It's interesting because as I go through a divorce right now, my security and grounded root chakra in my lower back comes and goes now of tension, and the patience with that has been profound. It's almost like that is my ultimate test of allowing myself to move through this and heal that part of me that is safe and is secure, and reminding it that that's just a story from the past. That is a ghost. But we have the cellular memory, to your point. And then the last part about you having that meditative state and having that interaction with your younger self. I happen to be a rapid transformational therapist, so I do hypnotherapy to take people back to the root cause, the scene, the time, the place, the moment in which that subconscious, let's say, abandonment fear showed up. And they typically go back to 1998, 99, and they're having the conversation and they're observing it like it's on a TV screen. And then we do an interruption. So tell me about the first time you started meditating. For those people who are listening who are like, I can't sit still 5 seconds. Are you kidding me? How am I going to have a profound, in-depth meditative state to be able to have a conversation with my younger self? Talk about your first experience and then advice for someone who wants to experience meditation like that.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, so I've always been a spiritual person, but the issue, one of my large issues with me was I intellectualized everything and mistaken that intellectualization for embodiment, which I think a lot of people are at. And I think that's a reflection of a lot of spiritual leaders today in our world, is they have intellectualized spirituality and haven't embodied it. And that's why there's no transformation or change. That's why we're dealing with the same shit we've been dealing with for thousands of years.
Right.
I forget who, but someone once told, I either read it or someone once told me that, all of the world's problems started because white men couldn't sit quietly in a room together. And I just, that sort of like visualization, like, is a pretty good representation of what we're all dealing with right now, which is if our leaders could just sit still for a second, who knows where our world would be, right? And so meditation starts with a willingness to surrender to what is, because if you aren't willing to surrender to what is, you're not going to sit still. You're going to push and push and push. Well, I want this. I want this. I want this. And full disclosure, I did that this fucking morning. Okay. So I am not past. I'm a human being and I deal with the same shit that every other human being deals with. I'm just a little more honest about it.
Right. Same.
Because I have nothing to prove. I as a formerly incarcerated person who's a felon and a brown person who can't get a job sometimes, I have nothing to prove. You know, it's like I'm here. So as far as me doing it, I did it in the worst possible. I did it incarcerated, surrounded by white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And that grace, right, I call it a grace now, is because I couldn't go anywhere.
Right. You were forced. Your hand was forced.
Yep. I wasn't, and it wasn't even safe for me. So it was like, I'm going to stick on my bunk a lot of times. And if you can't go outward, you go inward or you die. Right. So, and so it was like, I'm going to surrender to what is, which takes time. It takes time to be like, you know, so my book isn't a chronological book. You know, The Ocean Inside Me is very much, it's a spiritual journey. So it's not like, here's my life story. So sometimes when people read my book, they're like, oh my gosh, how'd you do it? And it was like, well, it makes it look like I did it quickly. I didn't, you know, I did it, you know, I was meditating 6 to 8 hours a day sometimes.
Wow.
Going into my body and experiencing nothing sometimes. And that surrender happens and it's not a thing you can control. That's why it's called surrender. And the universe, I call it the universe. Some people can call it God. Some people call it love. I don't care what you call it. It finds you when you're ready to open up to it. Right. So it's less of a, I've got to get it right. And it's more of a, how could you get it wrong? And that energy that comes in, you start to realize, I'm just the divine. That's it. It's like, the divine is playing hide and seek with itself, and I'm just a very good hider, right? And so there's a reality of like, once you realized, I'm the divine that decided to wake up in this meat suit, and my whole journey is to figure out, I'm just the divine. Then it's, where else can you go, and what are you hiding from? When that space opens up, there's less of that energy of, well, I'm doing it all wrong. And again, more of an energy of, no, I've always done it right.
We all are always doing it right. We cannot get this thing called life wrong. There is no right or wrong. It's simply an experience. You know, I say that all the time. And I think that, you know, on one hand, this is going to sound odd. You had the privilege of being in a confined space where you didn't really, you said you could choose a 6 to 8 hour meditation session. I would love that. Oh my God, I could sit all day long. Having said that, the challenge of trying to get it right is usually what I've run up against or what I'm trying to avoid, as well as my clients. And so you're spot on. And like you said, even this morning, you not being able to sit and accepting what is means accepting even the resistance. So radical acceptance, right, is part of that work. And so when you really, how would you describe it? So I try to describe it sometimes. When you find the ocean within, right? So you said you would describe to people how you would do it. You would actually put on headphones and listen to your handheld radio. So maybe just give us a little taste of that experience with you. What would that like?
Yeah, and I don't know if there's a video, but like, here's my book, and the cover is me, right? So
that's you with the headphones on, right? The ocean inside me.
So I put some headphones on. I bought some really cheap, shitty plastic headphones, and I described them in my book as like a prize you'd find in a cereal box from the 1990s, right? Like this sort of like, ooh, cool. It's you pay 99 cents for shipping and handling, and that's it, kind of a prison.
Right.
You know? See through, and you see all the little green parts, and so, you know, I put on these headphones, and at first it was just to escape the cacophony and noise of angry, racist men who can't sit still. Right?
You know, I'm going to read something from the book real quick because I just glanced down. I quote the book here: "My radio and meditation saved me from the murder of noise above me." I love the written word. I mean, that was really profoundly said. So yes, continue on.
Thank you.
you're escaping from that.
Right. At first it's an escape, right? It's acknowledging I just need to get out of here and I can't get out of here, right? You feel like a trapped animal in a corner. And so, you're climbing up all the walls trying to get around the people who've trapped you in a corner. So at first the prison radio was an escape. And so, all you have is an FM radio, right? And so you're not listening to Spotify or
right.
You're not listening to podcasts. You're listening to whatever is on the radio, which is usually very little in prison. There's not a lot of good signal, and so there's a lot of static. And so I just ended up just listening to the static and just acknowledging, okay, I'm just going to listen to this white noise and listen to the static. And it, again, like any surrender, it doesn't have to be noise. It can be wherever you're at. Once you decide to surrender, the universe comes in that form and takes you with it. It's a wrapping a blanket, sort of a divine blanket around you and saying, all right. And so the white noise and my body and what I needed, it all created this realm within me to help me address wounds that go way beyond me. Because as you know, and as your listeners know, you can't address the wounds until you feel safe enough to address the wounds. Well, prison is all danger. It's not safe. There's nothing safe about being in prison. And so my body had to create a safe enough realm for me to address these wounds in an unsafe environment, in the most unsafe environment. And so it was a level of surrender. And then the white noise opened up this sort of world where I could go into through the element of water. And I think in hindsight, the element of water, not just because I grew up in Oregon and love the ocean and love the beach and love the river. I mean, all those things play a role, but the practicality of it was that white noise over time just sounded a lot like rain and sounded a lot like the ocean. And then I kind of let my body and let my spirit take over and just went with it. And so I
think it's profound. Don't you love that your last name is Shore?
It works.
I think that's awesome. So some more of the book. So, because if people could pick this up, I always say if it's true here, it's true wherever you apply it.
Right.
So if they could pick up this practice, you're talking about prison, and you sent me a chapter. I need the whole book now. So prison teaches men to not care. It feels like a stadium full of fans who've just lost a home game. I mean, talk about figuring out how to avoid the catabolic energy that is just the fog of that location you were in. I mean, everything around you is victimhood, negativity, anger. Like you said, there's no windows, there's not enough space, there's no trees, there's no grass, everything is internal. Of course you can go outside every once in a while, but nothing about those environments is anabolic. It doesn't shine light. So if you can't go outward, you have to go inward. People have chaos that it's all relative, but they all have a sense of chaos that they've created around them. Like you said, it's almost like it's all over them. Until they can create that space and sit and listen within, how do they know they're ready? You say it'll happen how will they know when they're ready?
I mean, I think that and I really, really appreciate the gentleness you approach prison with. I think that's really kind, and we need more people who are like, that's really shitty.
I know.
And just to sort of, I love shifting perspectives, even my own. And so just to shift the perspective is what you just described any different from what our country is going through right now? Right.
So the chaos is everywhere. The catabolic energy is everywhere.
It's the same fucking thing.
It is.
The people who are experiencing what I experienced in that moment, it's almost like the universe was saying, I'm going to show you a glimpse of your country in about 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 years. You're just going to experience it on a condensed version. But I think about everything going on, especially with Sonia Massey that's happening, like all the stuff that's happening politically, the divisiveness, the unrest, the anxiety, the worry, the fear. We are feeling it globally, right? And so what I say to people is like, what you're feeling now, I felt times 1,000 in incarcerated because I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't turn on Netflix and pretend like it didn't exist, or watch a documentary and feel like I've done my part. There's a level of owning it and surrendering it to it, and that's why the mystics and the best of the best call it wounded healers, right? You accept the wound. The wound never goes away, but it no longer becomes a trauma because you've accepted it. And so you transform the wounds so you can heal the wounds of others. And so I do think that we are in a place where people are like running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And I'm here to say, I can help you. I can help guide you. And so you say, how do they know when they're ready? They're ready.
They're ready. And what they think they're supposed to be doing is doing.
Yeah.
And so everybody's like, yes, Nicoa, but it is chaos and it is catabolic. So I better go fix it. I have to go fix it. The best way you fix it is to, quote unquote, fix what you are currently perceiving or currently avoiding inside of you.
Yeah.
So, I know, guys, everybody's rolling their eyes. Oh, my God, she's going to say be the change. Yeah, I am. I'm going to tell you, because if I can create peace within me, then the ripple effect of my anabolic energy out to the world affects the next 5 people, which affects the next 5 people, which affects the next 50,000 people. And then we are sitting in spaces of peace, and we're sitting in spaces of compassion and connectedness. And even just connecting in your small corner of the world, if you're so led to go march or go, please vote, please. But if you are so led, listen to that. Is that led out of optimism and faith, or is that being led out of fear and anger? And there's value in all, but notice where you're coming from, and sitting in stillness and quiet, it can help you recognize what path you're being called to act within.
The transformation process, I always say, means moving from a doing to a being, right? And so you have to be the beingness. And again, as I said before, once you sort of go through that process of beingness, it will automatically lead to the doing. So we kind of have to like switch the roles of, once I do, things will change. No. Like once you be and go through that transformational process, then everything as a result changes. And that's how we're going to change this system, is we have to become the energy that we're wanting to see, as opposed to trying to force that energy onto other people and so that's the much larger issue, is that there's no transformation happening among the people that are making all the decisions. And so it really is counterintuitive, because the amount of shit we're going through, the universe is like, embrace and allow the shit, and that's how you're going to remove the shit. And
that's right. Accept what is without resistance. Yes. I'm sorry, I spoke over you.
No. And so I think that people are ready. And again, a lot of these tools that people like you or me or whoever else are here for is, again, like, don't mistaken the finger pointing to the moon for the moon itself. Meaning, a lot of people are so attached to a tool. They're like, well, I can't get yoga right. Or, well, I've now tried somatic therapy, or I've tried TRE, or I've tried IFS, or I've tried like therapy, or I've tried, going to yoga. The list goes on and on to infinity. And again, don't think that tool is the thing itself. You can find what you're looking for through like brushing your teeth, if that's what like helps you. So I'm here to show you the tools, and I'm here to show you that those tools are only just a way to get you to where you want to go. They aren't the end result. And so again, there's everyone and their mama is a spiritual guru now, right? So
Yeah.
I try to take the good with the bad and allow and sort of say, like, again, if it's not for you, let it go. Don't get attached to the thing itself.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, all these morning routines and, all these activities, honestly, I'm 55. I'm tired. I don't really have it in me anymore to be so ritualistic and so intense. My soon to be ex-husband took the Peloton. Best thing that ever happened. I was like, I feel so much more relaxed now without the Peloton in the house. Like it was just kind of like over there hovering. And now I'm following my body. So my body, every once in a while, like in the mornings, I'm like, oh, I'm doing a downward facing dog in the bed just so my lower back releases. And before I even get out of the bed, or I'm doing push-ups on the counter edge.
Yeah.
And then today I took a walk that I was going to the mailbox, and then I just kept going. And I was like, oh, I don't have a hat on. It's hot. Oh, well, I didn't wear my tennis shoes. I got flip-flops. Oh, I'm still walking. Oh, okay. I turned my little watch on. Get credit. But that to me is a way of being. That's the being. And it's no longer the NICOA doing that caused me to strive so much. Now I've like, okay, what if I just went with where I'm being called? So if anybody's listening that's being called to sit and try meditation, start with your eyes open. Just sit and look around. Like, just notice the details. I don't know. What other first steps might we advise them on? I know you have to wrap up here in a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
Let's get some tips.
Yeah. You can't build a statue of David without first learning what a chisel is, right? So there is a level of like being compassionate towards yourself and gentle towards yourself and saying, look, like, just start with one grain of sand before you try to dig up the whole beach, right? And so
yeah,
I think there's a level of just, try a minute. And again, if you go into a mindset of, am I doing it right? You've already missed the entire point. So the allowing is just sitting and observing and noticing. That's a good first step. And once you've done 2 seconds, do 3 seconds, and then do 5, and then give yourself a break and come back to it in 10 days if you need to. Like, be gentle with yourself and know that this is a process. And don't be afraid to ask for help from yourself, right? Or from others. Because we all could use a little encouragement. And so what I often tell clients is that, like, I'm here to just create the space. I'm not the healer. I'm just creating space for you to do the healing. But my goal as a healer is to make sure you're safe enough and there's enough space for you to start to reflect in new ways. And I'm just a mirror for you and a mirror for other people. And that's all that I can be. And also, like, that's good enough. And so find someone who you feel safe enough with, you can connect with, that is going to be gentle with you and sort of have enough compassion to show you how to be gentle enough with yourself. Because you will always be your greatest teacher, but sometimes it helps to reach out to someone who can kind of gently nudge you in the right direction.
I think that's beautiful. We are just creating that safe space. And, willingness really is the first step. I think just being curious, listening. If you're still listening to this interview, then you must be a little bit willing, because ultimately I can say for myself, and RG, I can tell from your demeanor and your beautiful life on social media that, it works. The cost from before, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or as I call it, the FUD factor of life that I felt so constantly was trying to control it, cost me physically, with dis-ease, right? I had malignant melanoma. I had what I thought was a near-miss heart attack, which was a panic attack. All sorts of messages from the body. And the cost of my life was chaos. It was stress, even though I was like, oh, but I have the whole checklist. I have everything I said I ever wanted. So what the hell is wrong with me? How could I be upset, anxious, uptight, feeling out of control? I had to integrate with my body and listen to what my body was telling me. Mm-hmm. And so, the other side of meditation being one tool, the other side of it is so beautiful and it's so relaxing. And our ability to observe ourselves allows me to really parse out the bodily message or, oh, right. Oh, what did I make that mean? I mean, it gives you a whole new toolkit of awareness that helps you get into those spaces more frequently. Because it's not that you go to the panic or the overwhelm or the chaos or the anxiety or the I can't sit still. It's how long do you stay there? And can you move compassionately out of it to that way of being that you crave? I mean, the cost to you before could have been death, could have been getting beat up, right? I mean, tell us a little bit more about your cost before and the true benefit now for you.
Yeah, the cost is always you're surrendering to the fact that you feel helpless, right? I mean, that's, I think anxiety and fear. And so things always boil down to anxiety, fear, doubt, shame, guilt, right? Like those sort of energies. And then when you break those down, when you're willing to sit long enough, even with those things, and sitting with those things is a mountain in itself.
Right.
Like, oh, this thing is just fear. But if you even are willing to sit even beneath that and break those down, my summation and my opinion is that those always lead to the real thing underneath all this is we don't want to die. That's we're fucking afraid of death, right? Because if we weren't so afraid of death, we would just be on this journey allowing everything. We're just afraid of dying, and we're afraid of dying with particular circumstances not happening or
without living. I mean, isn't that your point? I'm afraid of dying because I want to live.
Right. And we're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of death. And so, what happens in meditation for me that I can help people kind of get to within their own body is what if, just what if, hear me out on this one. What if like death didn't exist? What if there was a form before this form and there's a form after this form? And that energy creates a perspective of safety. Because if you start to if you go underneath the curtain, behind the curtain, and you see that you couldn't ever possibly go anywhere, you're just changing forms, then you realize, oh, this universe that is so expansive beyond my own understanding of it has always been there and it's always been me. Then it's less of like, oh, I've got to get this thing right. Or I've got to it's like, to me, it's like, if not in this time, then like maybe the next lifetime, right? Like, and so if we can get past this perspective of what does it mean, the whole thing, life by design, is what if, and this is a big what if and a scary what if, but what if there are past lives and future lives? And even more than that, what if all of your former incarnations, what if all the NICOAs before NICOA got together before you were birthed in this life and said, what do we want her to experience this time?
Woo, they gave me the whole damn checklist, RG.
and so there's a level of, okay, not only do I have agency as a co-creator in real time, but I actually chose all these things for myself.
Yeah.
And that
you're talking about beliefs.
Yeah.
And I invite everybody to play with the belief. You're right. What if? Most people don't like what if because they like it in a box. They like it to be clear. They want to know the right and wrong. They want to know how to get it right. But you're absolutely talking about opening the blinders of viewing the world, because we don't know. Nobody really knows.
The story is much larger than you think. I mean, to give an example is like, in reality, you haven't even left the Shire yet. That's
oh yeah.
Like people haven't even left the Shire. So that's a Lord of the Rings reference for anyone
Yep.
who doesn't know. But like, or like, you know, for you younger folks with Harry Potter, like you're still in the cupboard living at the Dursleys, right? So there's a much larger fucking story happening, and surrender to it. And then you'll be like, oh, okay. Like that's when things begin to open up.
That's right. It puts it all in perspective.
Yeah.
And it's a perspective, by the way, you get to decide on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're having fun in the perspective you've created and that's serving you beautifully, then keep going. But if you're suffering, then it's time to change the perspective, change the box, change the definitions.
And be patient.
Yes.
Be patient with yourself and exactly change your perspective.
I'm going to have you text me that please remember to be patient text frequently, because patience has not been part of the Capricorn A personality of NICOA. So I'm learning, and it sounds to me like you're continuing to learn as well.
Yeah.
Last question before we wrap up, and I'm just so grateful to have you here. And we didn't even get to talk about so many things, but gosh, maybe I can have you on again another time, maybe after your next book.
Yeah.
But you and I, you know, we have a lot in common here. And this is a question I ask all my clients at the end of their sessions. What is the one thing you want to celebrate the most about yourself before we wrap up this conversation today?
Well, the most thing I want to say, like, I am really resilient, and and a part of this journey is self-love, right? It's worthiness. Like, oh shit, I want to do all these things, and now now I feel worthy enough to do all these things. And it's only going into the wound that you're like, oh shit. So like, for example, in sort of manifesting and putting it out there, but also knowing is like, look, I'm going to create this nonprofit like that I did, but it's going to be a retreat center where people can come and do the healing work and do the trauma addressing work in a safe environment where people are like, oh, and then afterwards there's play, right? So that's a big part of my method and my teaching is like, it's not just trauma. And then you're not just Sisyphus pushing this rock up this hill. When we learn to address and release trauma and really go into the wound, which is tough work, then what next? Well, then you realize, oh, the universe just wants me to play as me. And so my whole goal through Northwest Wisdom is to create that place where people can come and do the hard work and play. And I'm really, really proud of myself that that's the vision, because it's a vision that comes from truth. And I believe that it will happen. I'm very proud of my book and writing it. And it's taken me a long time to like own it and be like, this is my story and it's a good one. And it deserves to be read and it deserves to be heard. And so, you know, I'm trusting that it's going to reach the people that it needs to reach. So these are just a few things that I'm like, hey, I'm really proud of myself.
I'm really proud of you too. And I'm really proud of me too. And that is the journey to get to that state of self-love and deservedness. And we're supposed to be having a good time. Yeah. And I'm so grateful for you to share your wisdom and your experience with us today. You know, I was just posting about playing more. I like to juggle in between my clients, and NPR just actually put an article out that talks about we're not playing enough. And I'll try to remember and put that link in our show notes today, and all the links to reach you. Any last minute thing you want to share that I haven't referenced? The book, the retreat center, the northwestwisdom.org. What else? I mean, just, if you could, like, any of your listeners could buy my book and support me that way. It's called The Ocean Inside Me, and you can get it on Amazon by just typing The Ocean Inside Me by RG SHORE, or our website, www.northwestwisdom.org. You can find the book there. I also have a masterclass on healing trauma. So there's all kinds of ways that you can support me, and I'm very grateful for any support that can come my way. Well, it is my honor to support you and champion you. And if there's anything else you think I can do to help out, please let me know. I will make sure all of that information is in the show notes. Everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you. RG, you're amazing. I'm so proud of you. And thanks for reminding me that I need to be proud of me too. So great conversation. Thank you. I will talk to you again in the future, I'm sure. Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us for a caffeinated conversation. Subscribe to Coffee with Nicoa for more stories from people living a life by design. You can also find inspiration on Instagram. Just follow Coffee with Nicoa. And check out our website, coffeewithnicoa.com. And that's Nicoa, NICOA. We look forward to talking with you soon, and enjoy your coffee between now and then.